Welcome back to Cult Radio A Go-Go Live. And we are on the air with our next guest of the evening, the man who has literally written the book on the Twilight Zone, if you will. We are talking to the one and only Stewart Stanyard, not only about your great book, but we also want to talk about your great website. Welcome to the show, Stewart.
Hi, Tiffany. Thanks for having me on your show tonight.
Well, I must say, I've got to start out with asking you the key question. It's a question everybody wants to know. Now, am I right? Twilight Zone, which was better, the original series or the other ones?
What other ones? Quite frankly, there's really only one Twilight Zone. All of these other series and movies, they really pale in comparison, and they just don't quite cut the mustard.
I agree. You're trained well, Stewart. You're trained well.
I mean, here and there are a few. Well, the thing about the remakes and the revivals is, they tend, of course, this is my opinion, but they tend to get worse as they make these things. They just don't get it. And I think that when the Twilight Zone was put together, it was a magical time. There was a lot of camaraderie. The original series was in black and white, and you had all of these classic actors, veteran actors. There was a mix back then. I think there was a magic to it, really. And I think that the producers and people of today, a lot of times writers and actual producers want to pay homage to Rod Serling with these remakes and revivals, but unfortunately they fall into the demographics of the networks.
Right.
I think a lot of them, too, is, you have to give them an A for effort, at least for trying. A lot of the scripts they said was unused Serling scripts, too, but it just didn't really have the magic, did it?
You mean used in remakes?
Yeah, from what I understand, unless I'm wrong, I heard that some of the stories were taken from Rod Serling that didn't get a chance to air on the original series, or am I wrong?
There was the Rod Serling Lost Classics, which was in, I believe, 1994, hosted by James Earl Jones, which had a 90-minute teleplay, Where the Dead Are, which was a Rod Serling script that was never used. And then also a story treatment, I think called The Theater, which the script was written by, the teleplay was written by Richard Matheson, who was one of the other main key writers on the original Twilight Zone. Besides that, there are two remakes, revival TV shows, remade some of Rod Serling's key episodes and just missed the target drastically every time. There's a handful of the first Twilight Zone revival in '85. There were about a half a dozen episodes that I think felt pretty good. They felt like they were fairly strong. Still not in black and white, which I think is a key element. The original, the starkness of the black and white matches the story, the intense mood of the stories, I believe. And I think they just miss that with doing these things in color.
And, of course, now we've even got Twilight Zone, the radio series, doing it in the old style of OTR. What do you think Rod would think of that? Do you think that he thought that maybe some of his shows that he did on TV would have worked on radio?
Well, Rod Serling started in radio, and I think that he probably would have respected those more because they're literally from his scripts. They're from the Twilight Zone scripts and done by actors of today's Hollywood and whatnot. And I think that they have some good elements in there. The fact that they're based right from Serling's work, and they are radio plays, so it's more in the mind's eye, filling in those blanks.
Right. Well, I understand. I don't know if it's a rumor. It's been said, especially the era that the Twilight Zone, the original series, came on with a lot of things that was going on in history. In that time period, that Rod would insert little secret messages, kind of like making a political commentary or whatever. Is that true?
Well, I think, in essence, with the Twilight Zone, Rod Serling really was able to cite social constructs of civilization, of urban alienation, fear and prejudice, the Cold War era, which was during the series, by sugarcoating that once controversial subject matter that he had problems with in censorship in his earlier live plays within the genre of fantasy and science fiction. And, he claimed that he just wanted to do a fun kind of fantasy series, but we all know that those messages the social commentary, the human element. That was Rod Serling's trademark, right. And that was in all of his work. So it was only natural that it would be throughout the Twilight Zone. I mean, it's a modern-day set of parables, morality plays, and the series just holds up so well today.
Now, it actually was on the air for 5 years, from 1959 to 64. That's a long run.
Yeah, that's a good run. In comparison to how TV is nowadays, I mean, but again, you're talking with somebody that doesn't even have cable. I think, about 5 years ago, I just said, I'm done. I'm done. Tiffany's laughing. The majority of television talks down to the viewers.
Right.
And that's the thing about the Twilight, shows like the Twilight Zone especially, Outer Limits, Star Trek. I think for the most part, these other shows also, like Twilight Zone, they speak up at you. They respect the fact that you have a brain and it works. Oh. And so much of today's television, in the majority, there's always a minority that's very creative and, treat you as an intelligent person and things like this. But those shows are in the minority.
Now, a large part of your work is to kind of encourage the remembrance of Rod. How often do you find that the new generation, the youth, either doesn't know who Rod Serling is, or perhaps they think he was just a host and that was about the extent of his involvement with TZ?
Or if you happen to mention Twilight, they're going, oh, yeah, that movie about the vampires.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, that's so funny that you mentioned that because, there's the Twilight series now, and somebody had written a young reader had written a review or something about, I love your book, It's like, well, my book's Dimensions Behind the Twilight Zone. It's not Twilight. It's totally different,
Wow.
But to answer your question, interestingly enough, even though those, the Twilight Zone celebrated its 50th anniversary last October 2nd.
Yeah.
And that's only 50 years. Now, young kids today know The Wizard of Oz. And things of this nature, yet a lot of times, Terry, you'll find that they don't know what I Love Lucy is, The Honeymooners, Lost in Space. The other day I made a remark about poor Dr. Smith never found his way back to Earth in this class I'm in, and they looked at me like, dude, what planet are you from? What are you talking about? Everything revolves around hip-hop and all this stuff. Okay, don't let me get started. But, but yeah, I think that, in essence, I think that youth, I'm not so sure they are aware of the Twilight Zone, and maybe even Star Trek, But then again, there are always college students and even high school students that, either have the Sci-Fi Channel or are into reading science fiction or fantasy or things of this nature, or who are interested in the arts and either want to be an artist or a writer or something. And I could probably guarantee that most of those kinds of kids or college students would know what the Twilight Zone is.
And Mr. Serling was actually a huge advocate for young writers. I remember a PSA that we had saw one time where it was him and Bennett Cerf, and they were all talking about a writing campaign for the youth of America.
Right. Yeah, he was involved in promoting writing for youth, and the Writers Guild and things of this nature. He was even a little off topic, but he was even the president of the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. So Rod Serling was always involved in a lot of things. He even did PSAs on television for pollution and things of this nature. I mean, it all goes back to the kind of person he was. He really had a respect for the human condition. I think even in junior high and high school, he was a class president. He went out for drama. He was into, a lot of things like that, raising money for war efforts and things at school, even at that length. But, yeah, he definitely promoted young people writing and things of this nature.
I'm so jealous because I know I watch Sci-Fi Channel, and they have this thing called Cable in the Classroom, and they have Twilight Zone episodes that the teacher's supposed to record and show the class. They never did that when I was in school.
And it's interesting you bring that up, because I've heard through my website from teachers across the nation that actually use Twilight Zone as lessons in social study classes and other classes. I find that really interesting, that they key into, again, those morality plays, because they really are those morality plays.
Yeah,
Right.
and definitely good writing, because when they can use it as a teaching tool in school, that says something.
Well, the Twilight Zone, we all remember it for the terrifying moments, the bizarre creatures and scary dolls and things like this. But really, there were a lot of poignant moments in the episode, in the series. People burn out on the modern civilization, wanting to go back into their childhood, and oftentimes seeing what the ramifications of that would be, and to just enjoy life the way it is, things like this, to enjoy your life while you have it. But there's terrifying moments, there's poignant moments, and it really it runs the full gamut, I think.
And most importantly, there's moments where Bill Shatner could actually act well. Sorry.
But
It's true.
I'll tell you, Nightmare at 20,000 Feet was the more popular episode, the one with the gremlin on the wing of the plane. But Nick of Time is a great episode, one written by Richard Matheson, in which the superstitious tendencies of William Shatner's character, so easily falls prey to that the mystic seer fortune-telling machine in the Busy Bee Cafe, and luckily he pulls himself out of it. But that's a great episode. But we do definitely remember him from Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, and just that one shot when he closes the shades and then opens it up, and the gremlin's in the window, just priceless. But great episode.
Well, it's really sad that we had the tragedy we had with Twilight Zone, the movie, with the death of Vic Morrow and everything.
Yeah.
But one of the things that was great in that film that I thought was pretty good was the recreation of John Lithgow in the terror scene, that William Shatner did. Do you think he did a good job, or is it just me?
Well, I kind of agree with Richard Matheson's comments, because that's a Richard Matheson story and script, in that, William Shatner started from, in the story, he started from a pretty normalcy tone, and then built up to this anxiety-ridden, guy that's the only guy that's seen the gremlin on the wing of the plane, and who just got through a nervous breakdown from flying. So now he's on this plane. In Lithgow's version, he starts at 110%, and to go from 110% to even higher is just, I don't know. I think that it would have built. I mean, it's a good performance. I mean, who am I to say if John Lithgow did a good performance or not? But as a viewer, it seemed like, how do you start from that intense anxiety and go higher from that?
Right.
I think that obviously the one obvious thing is that the gremlin was, I don't want to say far superior, but even Richard Matheson said that he enjoyed the gremlin from the new version that was in '83, the Twilight Zone, the movie.
Well, let's face it, the original gremlin looked like somebody in her pajamas.
Well, it kind of looked like a teddy bear with a very interesting William Tuttle face. And you'll notice they never show any scenes of the gremlin from the back, because there's a predominant zipper going down that suit there. But Nick Cravat played the gremlin, and he was a acrobat, a partner of Burt Lancaster, actually, in the early days. And to be honest, I really prefer the original Twilight Zone for most everything that it is. The little invader puppets from the Agnes Moorehead episode, The Invaders. I dig the gremlin. I think the dramatic lighting, I think that the makeup on the face when he's in the window, it seems a little clunky and a teddy bearish, when he's out on the wing, and you can tell he's being pulled up by a crane, but with those wires and stuff. You can't really see the wires, but you can tell he's being pulled up. But still, the classic shot of him in that window looking at Shatner is really terrifying. It doesn't matter that the suit looks like a teddy bear, because that face is just, it's really a very strong image.
I think they should use Nick of Time for the people that basically are hooked on the little machines in Vegas. Because that's kind of, the same thing there. Definitely,
yeah, pretty much, isn't it?
It should be a cable in the classroom for them.
Yeah. Well, there was an episode on gambling, on slot machines in the Twilight Zone. I mean, they touched on a lot of different things in that series.
Yeah, that's right. I remember that now. It's where the machines literally followed you, right?
Franklin, the guy that was so against gambling, and he's such a hypocrite. He just gets the gambling bug, and it's another one of those classic morality tales all about, gambling and whatnot.
Now, the Twilight Zone went the gamut from the crazy creatures like the two-headed alien, which I believe was Richard Deacon or something from the Dick Van Dyke Show, all the way to things that were morality tales like we talked about, some of which were written by Earl Hamner Jr. from the Waltons.
Earl Hamner wrote, I think 6 or 8 episodes, and most of which were country folk based. Jess Bell was one, and The Hunt was another one. But he also wrote A Stopover in a Quiet Town, which was the couple that wake up in this town and there's no people, and they keep hearing the laugh of this little girl, and everything in the town is fake. And we don't want to give any spoilers away on your show because you may have some listeners that haven't seen these episodes. But a great twist ending on that one. But yeah, he did actually. He christened his Hollywood career as a writer on The Twilight Zone. Before he did The Waltons and wrote the screenplay for Charlotte's Web and wrote Falcon's Crest, among a plethora of books and all kinds of other things.
Definitely. I've got to ask you, do you have there's like a bobblehead out of Talking Tina now. Do you have
Yeah,
that?
I have the bobblehead.
I kind of guessed.
I don't get everything that's Twilight Zone because just like any other marketable license thing, actually I must say that over the years, us Rod Serling fans were always in the shadows of Star Trek. Star Trek was the main thing that just, had dolls and puzzles and T-shirts and phasers and just hundreds and thousands of products that would just milk that license. And then later on, they also milked the license and did like 5 or 6 TV shows that just tended to get weaker and weaker as they made them. But with Twilight Zone, you really, in the 70s and even in the 80s, you just had the comic books. And that was it. And even those aren't really from the show.
Hey, you sound like me. I get all excited because, like, when the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror came out at Disney, I was the first one in the gift shop, and then it gets spoiled because you see whatever they have has Mickey on it,
Yeah, but see, you won't see anything like our Twilight Zone books or the DVDs or anything. You'll only see Disney stuff in that store. But, I think in the late 90s and definitely in the 2000s, they started, doing things like the trading cards, the set of trading cards by Rittenhouse, and a few other products. There's the bobbleheads. There's Sideshow Toy does the figures, and they're very cool and they're very fun, But when it all comes down to it, all of these things, it's all about the series. It's all about the show. It's all about those wonderful stories that just blow our mind. And you could see an episode 100 times and still totally dig it. At least I can.
Yeah. Now, when you wrote your book, Dimensions Behind the Twilight Zone, you actually had an interview you interviewed about 39 different Twilight Zone alumni.
That's incredible.
Can you tell us some of the people that you've chatted with and some of your fondest quotes or memories from your interviews with them?
Well, I interviewed about close to 60 people, and I had some of the interviews were really long, and I had a plethora of people that I had interviewed, and which was just, I can't tell you how much an immense honor and pleasure it was to be able to talk with these people. And 39 interviews made it into the book. There's the more meatier ones are in the front, then a few of the later ones are in the back. But, I did interview, you mentioned Earl Hamner. I also interviewed Richard Matheson, who was one of the other key writers on the series, along with George Clayton Johnson, with another writer. I interviewed directors like Lamont Johnson and Richard Baer and Richard Donner and Ted Post. And, these guys have created all these TV shows and all these movies. I interviewed a couple producers, Burt Granite, who passed away a few years back, and a whole bunch of actors, which was just insane. I'm just thinking off the top of my head, Fritz Weber, that was a great guy to talk with. I tried to talk with Shatner, but it was quite difficult. He did endorse the book, so that was nice.
Well, at least you got that.
Yeah, at least I got that. Cliff Robertson, who was in 2 Twilight Zones and a great actor in tons of movies. The comedian Shelley Berman, who was in one. Anne Francis. Dennis Weaver. I interviewed Dennis Weaver, and about 3 weeks later he passed away. So I can't tell you how much of an honor it was to be able to talk with Dennis Weaver, especially because, you know, his episode, Shadow Play, which was written by Charles Beaumont, is one of my favorite episodes. And you know, Twilight Zone fans, I think a lot of fans agree that that's the one where the guy wakes up in the courtroom and he's being tried and convicted for murder in the first degree, and he's going to go to the electric chair. But he claims, no, this is a dream. This is a nightmare having night after night after night. And, you know, you look at Dennis Weaver's career, and he did a lot of cowboy movies, a lot of TV shows, Gunsmoke and things like this. But that 1.5 hour show is just so brilliant. His acting is just, it's really right on. Another thing that he did was the movie Duel, which came out in the early 70s. The Richard Matheson, and again, another Richard Matheson, who, you know, the guy in the car who's being chased by the guy in the big truck, the Big Mac truck, if you recall that movie.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, great movie.
Yeah, so another great performance.
That was like Spielberg's first thing, too.
Yeah, that was actually Spielberg's, his first, that was his first TV movie. But his directorial debut was on Rod Serling's Night Gallery.
Fantastic.
He directed Joan Crawford in the pilot. In the pilot movie, there were 3 stories. The one called Eyes. He directed Joan Crawford. Can you imagine your first gig? Even Steven Spielberg, can you imagine your first gig directing Joan Crawford?
Wow.
Joan's a personal favorite of mine, so I can't even imagine that. I couldn't even talk to her.
So they're really kind of different as day and night, but you find that people get Twilight Zone and Night Gallery mixed up a lot.
All the time. All the time. Even though the Night Gallery was color and Twilight Zone was black and white, you still find that people say, oh, I remember that one when the guy had the earwig in his ear. Oh, that was a Night Gallery. Yeah. Oh, you remember the one where the guy's coming down the stairway? You know, the guy that was in Planet of the Apes, you know, Roddy McDowall.
Right.
The guy in Planet of the Apes, and the painting keeps changes, and he dies or something. Ah, that was a Night Gallery.
Now,
so it happens a lot.
It seemed to me that the Night Gallery was a little bit more edgy. It pushed
horror.
The limits more. Was there any reason that you're aware of? Did Rod ever make any comments as to why he went in a little bit more of a strong direction with Night Gallery?
Yeah, because like Twilight Zone was more like fantasy, right?
Yeah, Twilight Zone was more fantasy, and you can't really call it a science fiction show because it really wasn't. It just used science fiction, the genre of science fiction, but it was a fantasy series. Certainly concentrated on the message-oriented stories. Matheson concentrated on weird things that would happen, but usually with happy endings or good endings. And Charles Beaumont, who was the third main writer, concentrated on kind of like dark fantasy. But Twilight Zone, in comparison to Night Gallery, I mean, first of all, Rod Serling did not produce or executive produce, have any capacity like that for Night Gallery. He passed on being the producer or executive producer for Night Gallery because of the beast, I think, that Twilight Zone had become. It was really a monumental task. I think after the 3rd season, he was kind of getting burned out on it. That's why he went and was teaching writing at Antioch College and things of this nature. But, Night Gallery was produced by Jack Laird. And Jack Laird, I'm sure, was a very fine producer and had some acting experience and things like this and has a long list of credits. However, you would think that you would say, wow, I have Rod Serling. I have the guy that created Twilight Zone. I should really use his input and really his genius, to help me. But instead, I think because Rod was burnt maybe or just didn't want to take the responsibilities of Night Gallery like he did with Twilight Zone, that he passed on that, and Jack Laird produced Night Gallery, and it became more of Jack Laird's thing that he wanted to do. And that was more of a shock value horror show. And in my opinion, it's more of a horror show. Yeah, there are a number of Night Galleries that are Twilight Zone-esque. Of course, they're Rod Serling scripts.
Yeah.
And so if you follow them closely, they still feel somewhat like Twilight Zones. But there's a lot of Night Galleries that are shock value, that are horror, whereas the Twilight Zone was psychological terror. So that's why it's a different kind of feel to it. Plus the fact that Night Gallery, I don't think it doesn't hold up for me quite as well. One thing is the costuming. You watch Night Gallery, it's like, oh man, these embarrassing 70s, clothing and 70s lingo, this bohemian 70s kind of feel, and it's just, the Twilight Zone is timeless. It's not like you watch it and it doesn't feel like it's dated.
Well, you got to interview, maybe you didn't get to interview, I was going to say I got to interview one of the directors, which was William Asher. I didn't even realize he did an episode of Twilight Zone. Which episode did he do?
Wow, you're blanking me out.
Okay.
Wow, you blanked me.
Well, you read your book.
Read my book. Wait, what book is that? No.
You're probably like me. You're at that age where things like you'll remember it like 10 minutes after we're off the air.
Yeah, I'm starting to. I'll get to it in a moment. I'm sorry, what was the question, though?
I just mentioned William Asher, but the thing about Twilight Zone that's great in comparison to Night Gallery, and that is it also had humor in it.
Yeah, the Twilight Zone had a number of comedy episodes. And, I think there's about, maybe a dozen, maybe. And I would say that maybe half of them work. There's a couple comedies that work really well. I think The Mind and the Matter, that's kind of a comedy episode. Well, it is because Shelley Berman's a comedian.
And then the one with Carol Burnett, too, was great.
Okay, I think, oh man, this is where I'm taking a total, I just made a U-turn on you there because Cavender's Coming is one of the turkeys, dude.
Really?
I'm sorry, yeah. And the hardcore fans just really, just overall, it's not knocking Carol Burnett, it's not knocking Jesse White or any of these great actors. It's just the material and the jokes that are so flat. And it's also basically a remake of an earlier episode called Mr. Beavis, the guardian angel helping the person, and then the person just settles for their plain old life, and they learn the lesson to just live life the way it is. But it just,
it had a laugh
Cavender's
track.
Coming, I'm sorry, man. It's one of the turkeys, dude. There's two of them, and that's one of them.
And the Carol Burnett one had a laugh track, too, didn't it? It was terrible.
When it first aired, the very first time that episode aired, its original airing, it had a laugh track. And, any time you put a laugh track in it, it's just, I mean, that's just so low.
Now, Stewart, we actually have a live chat room that's going on during our show, and listeners will submit questions.
Great.
One of our listeners is asking, he said that he knows you may not know because you weren't Rod and, may not have known him personally, but did you have any inkling of knowing what Rod Serling's personal political beliefs were?
Well, I think that, I know that Rod Serling was literally the first person that spoke out in Hollywood, that spoke out against the Vietnam War. Mm-hmm. And Rod Serling was a paratrooper and saw action and death when he was in the Philippines. And he was, I believe, captured by the Japanese. He was awarded and all these kind of things. And I think from the war, he got a stronger view of, trying to have respect for mankind and how cruel mankind is not really very kind. As far as his political, I think he was more of a conservative. Mm-hmm. But besides that, I really couldn't comment too much on his political beliefs. Besides the fact that, he did not agree with a lot of the decisions made to go to Vietnam and things like that.
Well, another person in the chat room brought up something interesting, too. In fact, he was reading my mind. I was just getting ready to tell you that.
Yeah.
Twilight Zone took a very interesting turn in the fact it was mostly 30-minute episodes, but in Season 4, it became an hour, and did it not go to videotape and had that crazy live look to it?
Oh, it did. Oh, and let me take a sidestep. Wait, Asher, I came back into my brain. Mr. Beavis, whoa, the episode we were just talking about.
Ah.
He directed Mr. Beavis in the original Twilight Zone. Wow, it just popped back in my head.
There you go. You sure you wasn't looking at your book now, were you?
No, I wasn't, because that's not actually, it's not every little tidbit is in my book. And plus my book is not an episode guide, that kind of thing. But, and the question was, oh yes, the fourth season, they did not have a sponsor. At the end of the third season, when it was coming up for the next season, the Twilight Zone didn't have a sponsor. And because of that, Buck Houghton left the series and went to something else. He was the main producer for the first 3 seasons. Rod Serling went to Antioch to teach adult writing classes. And they had some other series that came on in its place, which obviously died. And so halfway through the season, they decided to bring Twilight Zone back, and they had a sponsor. So they only had 18 slots of episodes. Mm-hmm. So they decided, well, why don't we make them hour long episodes just to fill in, the fact that we only have a tiny season here, which was a bad mistake because The Twilight Zone was its strongest in its 2-act, format, 30-minute format. It's like 26-minute actual episode.
And on film stock, it looked like mini movies,
Yeah, well, a lot of them, Terry, they just seem to drag. Again, my opinion, but it's the opinion of a lot of fans. And there's a minority of them that are really strong episodes. On Thursday, We Leave for Home, a great episode by Serling. One of the better comedy episodes, The Bard, which is another Rod Serling episode script, was another good, strong one. There's a few of them that are in there. I think the Burgess Meredith Printer's Devil is a good episode, and Death Ship, which is Jack Klugman. And, so there's a small handful of them that work. But the other ones, the point is that they just seem to drag. They just kind of drag along. Whereas in its third season, if not fourth season, that's when Outer Limits started, its first season. And, the Outer Limits boasted a Monster of the Week kind of theme. And that was an hour-long series, which also had a lot of comments on the human condition and things like this. But I think that the hour-long episodes worked for Outer Limits because that was the format in which they were originally conceived.
Mm-hmm.
It was that kind of a series, an hour series, like Star Trek, same kind of thing. Whereas Twilight Zone was conceived as a 2-act, quick, bam, boom, doo, wow, twist ending. Oh my God, I never saw that coming, and that was the show.
But one of those hour-long episodes that was done on video, and I guess it was because it was done on video. I can't even think of the name of it now. See, I'm like you. And once in a while they just fly over the top of your head. I was watching on Sci-Fi Channel, and it literally looked like it was going to disintegrate while I was watching it. Do we have all the episodes? Are they all preserved? Is there any that's disintegrated?
Well, there were 6 episodes that were in video. And I think that, I don't recall. I'm sitting here trying to, pardon me, I'm doing this while we're on the air here, but I'm sorry, but I hate to differ, but I'm pretty sure there's no video hour-long episodes.
Oh, okay. Well, I thought they just looked that way to me. I thought they were video.
I'm pretty sure, that there's no videos. I think most of those were in the first in the second and third. Actually, there might have been one in the 5th season. Short Drink from a Certain Fountain. I'm getting my seasons mixed up, but I think that when you just talk about the video episodes, they definitely have a different tonality to them. It's just like, whoa, what the heck is this? This Kinescope Live.
Right.
It doesn't. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't feel quite right.
But in knowing that, like I said, the one I saw was really. It was. Do
you remember what the storyline was at all?
I'm thinking it was the one where the rich people would put on the mask and show their true selves. You know which one that is?
Oh, you're right. Yeah, that's the Masks, which is in
right.
the 5th season. Yeah, but that's not a video. That's not a video one though.
Well, the print I saw was really, really bad. I don't know what happened, but
it might have just been a bad print. Yeah.
I was just wondering if because of that or what I saw, do we have all the episodes? Is there any missing that they cannot show because they don't exist anymore?
No. But in the first original syndication run, there was the 6 video episodes were not, or there was a couple episodes that were not in the original syndication run. But my own personal thing is the video ones. Because the Twilight Zone was in film, and it just had a film. It felt like a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly you go to this kind of somewhat cheaper videotape. They did that for budget reasons. It just doesn't feel the same. The stories there's some really great ones. Long Distance Call is one of the video episodes. So nothing with the stories, but I think just the quality, it just kind of pulls you out of that feeling of the Twilight Zone, being in film.
Well, even one person in the chat room just said that it just made it look cheap.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Whoever that was, it made it look somewhat cheap. And it was cheap. And again, it was for budget reasons.
Well, before we wrap this up, Stewart, we have talked about Dimensions Behind the Twilight Zone, your book. We also want to take a moment to talk and have you tell us a little bit about your website, the Twilight Zone Archives at twilightzone.org. What inspired you to start this, and what can people see if they go there?
Well, let me preface that by just saying that the book Dimensions Behind the Twilight Zone, like you mentioned, Tiffany, it has 39 interviews with alumni that worked on the series. The one thing that's besides that that's very cool is that I happen to have a collection of these behind-the-scenes, on-set, original production photos that were shot during the actual filming of the series, and something close to 5,000 images. The book I made about 350 photos in the book. So you have these behind-the-scenes photos, behind-the-scenes interviews. There's 5 chapters by the author, historical and analytical in nature, and then also a dozen appreciation essays by people who worked in today's Hollywood who were influenced by Rod Serling, even a writer, Dana Gould, on The Simpsons. And I even had
I'm laughing because he's kind of a stalker of our radio station.
Oh, is he?
Yes.
I love Dana. He's a good pal, you know.
Tell him I said hello.
Yeah. And Penn Densham, who was one of the producers of the new Twilight Zone, I gave him a chance to kind of voice his opinions about what they were up against. But the Twilight Zone archives, and then the book is celebrating its 3rd anniversary on April 1st. Which is not an April Fool's. It really is on April 1st. That's the 3rd anniversary. And for anybody that is a Twilight Zone fan, I guarantee you'll dig the book. It really feels, I think it's the closest thing that you can get in book form, the feeling like you're behind the scenes. You know, no one else has these photographs. I don't even think CBS has them. But besides that, the Twilight Zone Archives is a non-profit organization. I've never made a cent. I don't take donations or anything on it. It started back in 1999, and this January we celebrated our 10th anniversary, and you know, it's a very cool site. It's, you know, it has your normal things like episode guides and things of this nature. It has you know, props and a lot of these pictures and some comments from actors. It has this very unique thing I created called the Episode Finder. Years ago, I would get so many emails from people who visited the site, which is great. But after a while, it's like, my gosh, I'm answering all these emails. I'll create this thing that's a fun tool to use to figure out, you know, for people that can't remember the episode.
That was like me earlier.
Yeah, so it's a very fun tool. But, you know, again, it promotes Rod Serling's work, and it's happened to come to be the #1 Twilight Zone website, and which is very cool. And again, it's a non-profit, so
that's cool.
you know, it's just about promoting Rod Serling's work. And you know, he was a great writer. He was a great man. He really was a humanitarian. He was way ahead of his time. And the man died at 50, June 28th, 1975. And you know, unfortunately, he was a heavy smoker.
Oh, yeah.
And we all know, even though cool, for some reason people think smoking cigarettes is so cool, I'm so cool. It's like, well, yeah, are you cool when you're in the grave? I mean, you know. So, but he smoked like 4 packs a day.
Ooh. Yeah.
Sad.
So did you get a lot of cooperation? I mean, did you have to actually even talk to whoever it is that owns the rights now? Because I was doing an article on The Outer Limits when it had its rebirth on Showtime, and I got a hold of the rights owners of the originals, and they were very pleased to talk me into doing an article instead on the original series. And they provided me with a bunch of stills and that. You get any cooperation like that, or?
No, I haven't had any outside, you know, interests or things like this. I did have a few people that became contributors to the site, as far as like, you know, maybe a rare photo here or there, a call sheet, things like this. But as far as like, you know, being affiliated with CBS or Viacom or anything like this, I have a disclaimer on the site. I am in no way connected with CBS or infringing on their products or any of this kinds of stuff. One thing that separates me from any other site like this is that you know, it's twilightzone.org,
right.
O-R-G. It's a non-profit. It is not a .com, and it's not a commercial site. It's just an informative kind of site, and
it's
I'm not infringing or anything like this.
Well,
I do have affiliations with companies that make products, but those are legitimate licensings that those companies, like the bobbleheads and the figures and things like this, that they actually pay licensing, and then I become an affiliate of them. But, you know, I haven't had any problems, and I can't see how I would, because I'm it's free promotion.
It's exactly what it is. And if you turn around and recognize it enough to do cable in the classroom, we need people like you to further, the education of this classic series.
Yeah, I think so. I think that, the series should live on. I think that even we'll all be long and buried or whatever, and it'll still be playing somehow, somewhere. Holographic TV sets that float in your living room. I don't know, whatever. But people will still be tuning into it and going, God dang, this is a really cool series. Man, this was made 100 years ago, and it's way better than anything we have nowadays.
And the thing is, Mr. Serling was so dignified. I was laughing on the show one night because it was on the news at the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. They had an incident when the lights went out and the elevator shaft went to drop, that some guy pinched some woman's bottom, and I was making a joke and laughing and thinking that Rod was having fun. But then again, he'd be too dignified for that.
It's funny. We all see Rod Serling as this suave, kind of like, dark figure there or whatever. But actually, he was a really down-to-earth fellow. He had a great sense of humor. He loved telling jokes. He really did not, he wanted to believe that UFOs, that aliens crashed in New Mexico in the late 40s, and then ESP and all these things. But when it came down to it, even though he wrote about all those things, he really didn't believe in a lot of it. He was just the kind of guy that if he was walking by a cemetery at midnight, he'd get a little creeped out.
Now, we were talking about one more thing. We were talking about the lost episodes or whatever, supposed lost episode. Sci-Fi turned around and played it as being a lost episode. Occurrence at Owl Creek.
Oh, yeah, that was an outside film, a French film that was brought into the series in the 5th season. It was the only thing that was an outside film. They felt that it was so good and it felt like a Twilight Zone that they bought rights to be able to play it on the Twilight Zone. Rod Serling did a special introduction for it and explained what the film was. And, Occurrence is also one of those films that's shown in high schools, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But they kind of came off like it was a Twilight Zone episode, though, I think, if I'm remembering right.
Oh, sure. No, they did.
Yeah.
But he did, like I said, in the intro, he mentions that this, this is a French film. It won the Cannes Film Festival award, this and that. And, we've never done this before on the series, but we felt this film was fit so well in with the genre of Twilight Zone that we wanted to bring it into the series.
Well, why don't we...
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. I didn't want to cut you off.
No, I was just going to say, it still has the Twilight Zone intro and things like that. So.
Still very cool.
But it's the only outside film out of 156 episodes.
I'm just hoping there really is lost episodes. I know there's not, but...
Hey, I'm with you, man. I really wish that there were things that were, never produced, and there's a few scripts that were in the attic that still, I think that those are the ones that made it in the Lost Classics in '94.
Right.
We always hope that, isn't there some? There's only one tiny 5-second blooper from Twilight Zone on Rod Serling when he's doing the intro for He's Alive, the episode with oh come on, oh dude.
I know what you're talking about. I have that.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I have that.
I'm blanking on his name right now. See, that's going to get me now. Hey, I'm only human,
Hey, welcome to Twilight Zone.
Yeah, how can you forget? I'm sorry, I'm spacing on his name. But the point is that we all want, as Twilight Zone fans, Rod Serling admirers, what have you, we always wish that there would, in the box set, or there would be the special thing that would have behind-the-scenes footage, just like people talking and stuff, or a blooper reel, or different versions, or cut things that were cut, or alternate takes, or things like this. We wish that those things existed, and you know what? Maybe something like that does. But in my opinion, these the networks, the main networks, they really don't really care about these old shows. The only thing they care about is licensing for them and still marketing products that may have a T-shirt with Beverly Hillbillies on it or something, and still making money off of that. But as far as they're concerned, those shows are ancient history. We really don't care about them. What we care about is what's now and new. You have all these 25-year-old producers that, there may be even some who don't even know what the Twilight Zone is. I can't imagine how they wouldn't, but, Jonathan Harris told me this one story. Dr. Smith, who was in a couple Twilight Zones, told me a story about, very condensed here, just about how he went into a meeting to read for this part, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Maybe it was in the 80s. and these two guys were talking about the other part. Maybe, you know who'd be good for that is Cary Grant. And one of the other producers, you know, who's like a 25-year-old guy, said, "Who's that?" And Mr. Harris, you know, put his pencil and his pad of paper back in his briefcase, closed his briefcase, and then said, you know, "I hope you find out who Cary Grant is." And then I won't say the next part that he said.
Yeah. I can imagine.
Okay.
I interviewed Angela
in
Cartwright.
that inimitable Dr. Smith format, you know.
I interviewed Angela Cartwright, and she told me some of the things that he said.
Yeah, I love Jonathan Harris.
God
I
bless him.
absolutely love Jonathan Harris.
Miss him.
He was a great actor. Luckily, I met him a month before he passed away. I contributed photographs to his A&E biography. He was such a sweet man, and I you know, like you, grew up with Lost in Space,
Right.
Will Robinson, The Robot, all of these shows, you know, and Lost in Space, and I absolutely so identified with Dr. Smith. He was just one of the greatest characters ever.
Definitely.
Well,
I miss him. I miss Jonathan Harris.
Absolutely. Well, Stewart, we want to thank you so much for being on the show, and I've just been sitting back and laughing, listening to you two go and relive your childhood memories.
Well, hopefully I didn't ramble on too much.
No, not at all.
It's always a welcome conversation to talk about the past. To remember that before Chucky, there was Talking Tina.
That's right.
Oh, exactly. You know, we didn't talk about our favorite episodes. You must tell me, Terry, what's your favorite episode?
Oh.
You have one?
You know,
like if
really,
you would say the epitome of
no,
Twilight
actually,
Zone.
I do have one, and I can't remember the name, but you'll know which one I'm talking about. That's the Christmas episode with Art Carney where he becomes Santa Claus.
Oh, that's a great episode.
Yes.
Night of the Meek.
There you go.
That's one of the video episodes.
It is. There you go. That's right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting to hear. That's your favorite episode. Wow, how very cool.
It's so cool because we even have a track. It wasn't done by Rod or anything, but we have a track we play on the station here called A Twilight Zone Christmas, where somebody's doing a bad Rod Serling impersonation.
Oh,
and
okay.
Talking about Jesus' head lighting up like a light bulb. But
oh, no.
Somehow I just associated Twilight Zone with Christmas and the whole fancy thing. It just worked. I don't know.
What about
you, Tiffany? Do you have a favorite episode?
Okay, I do, but again, I don't know the name of it.
That's all right.
So the episode where it's the classic twist is the irony that he just wants to be left alone, and at the end he gets left alone because the world is destroyed.
Oh, you're talking about the Burgess Meredith
episode. The Burgess Meredith where he breaks his glasses.
Yeah, he wants to read, but the
time enough at last. It was time now.
Yes.
Time enough at last.
Yes.
God, what an actor.
That's probably the most memorable episode. Everyone remembers that episode, along with, you know, Nightmare at 20,000 Feet,
right.
The Invaders, and things like this. But I'll tell you my favorite episode.
What's that?
Is To Serve Man.
Oh, To Serve Man.
To Serve Man.
I'm going to be spending some time with him. I'm going to be on a set with Mr. Alien himself, the
with
one and
Richard
only
Kiel.
Richard Kiel.
With Richard
yes.
Kiel.
Yes.
Oh, very cool. Yeah.
And you know something? He is fucking big. I mean, that man is that big. He is huge.
He's huge.
Ooh,
I had him sign an autograph, you know, like in a book, like just a blank book. I wanted his autograph, and he said, he put his hand on the page and traced his hand. And it's huge. It's huge. But I love To Serve Man. That's my, you know, the benevolent aliens come down to Earth to solve, you know, our war and famine. And, you know, if we'd like to make reciprocal trips to their planet, by all means. They're just here to serve us. Dun-dun-dun-dun. Oh, my God.
And I got so excited when I met him. I'm like, I really love that episode of Outer Limits. Oh, no, Twilight Zone.
Yeah, a lot of times people mistake Outer Limits for Twilight Zone, vice versa. You know, it's really interesting. Outer Limits was I love Outer Limits too, man. There are some classic episodes in there.
I think it probably scared me more than Twilight Zone, but I think I like Twilight Zone the best.
Twilight Zone just knocked you out, you know, and
Yeah.
because it was a half hour, you know, you knew the characters in the first, like, in the back of your hand in the first, like, 2 minutes. You knew everything about these characters, and, you know, it was put together so well. You know, comeuppance against Nazis and greedy people and power-hungry capitalists and things like this. I mean, they just covered everything on that series.
Well, you'll have to tell Dana Gould hello. It was a very strange situation with us and Dana because we have a website and we had a live video show that day and we had a porn star here. And he happened to see the photos, so he was begging me to come to the studio when we have a porn star here again.
He did?
Even though he's married, yes.
Oh, he must have just been teasing you. Dana, you silly boy. What are you talking about, Daddy-O?
He was like, I listen to you every week. I'm like, you fucking lie, okay?
Well, hey, you never know. He could be listening right now.
He very well
He could be listening right now and just laughing and going, oh, Stuart, you're so silly.
But he's hilarious. He's hilarious. But thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, and we want to encourage everyone to head on over to your website, twilightzone.org, and to also check out your book. I'd imagine it's available on Amazon and things like that, correct?
Yeah, you can find it in most any bookstore. You can find it on Amazon.com. Just search for Twilight Zone if that's easier, and the second or third book down. And, enjoy. Here's to the next 50 years of Twilight Zone.
Absolutely.
The greatest TV show ever created. Dun, dun, dun.
I've just got to know, you ever rode the ride?
Oh, the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror?
Mm-hmm.
I went on it one time this last summer. I went on it, and I was very impressed. I thought it was very cool. I liked the treatment of how they, kind of overdubbed. They used video of Serling, footage of Serling, and they overdubbed. Obviously they had another narrator doing an impression of Serling, but every time you knew there was something else Serling was saying that wouldn't match his voice, they would change the film to another kind of visual. But they did it so very nicely, and the ride itself is really incredible. It's a fun ride. It's very cool. I think it's a very cool thing.
And when you're in the ride and they bring you up and it's pitch black and they open the doors and you see the spinning wheel, you know you're home.
Yeah, I think the thing about the ride, it's unpredictable, just like the Twilight Zone.
Yes.
The Twilight Zone's unpredictable, and the ride is too. You never know when it's going to end. It's going up again. Oh my God, I'm falling. Oh my God, it's going up. Oh, wow. But for me, the Disneyland has always been about the Haunted Mansion.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Oh man, I love the Haunted Mansion.
Well, we'll have to keep in touch with you, Stewart, and maybe have you on again, because there's just not enough time to talk about all things Twilight Zone and Rod Serling. But it was great fun having you on tonight, and we'll have to have you on again sometime.
Well, my pleasure. I would love to be on your show again. It was quite fun chatting with you both, and I hope we had a fun time here. And I didn't have too many bloopers on my trivial kinds of things. I'm an artist. I'm an illustrator. I'm more into the art. When somebody, I'm the opposite of what was the, combination of Captain Kirk's,
right?
His safe and his. I don't care. What does that matter? It's more about the stories, man.
Exactly.
But yeah, well, thanks again for having me on your show. And if you'd like to have me on your show again, I would, of course, participate. And again, here's to the next 50 years of the Twilight Zone.
Perfect.
You make sure you get a hold of Dana, because he said he was coming on, and then he stopped answering me. We got to get him on.
Oh, no.
All right, Stewart, you have a good night.
Good night.
All right, you too. Thanks a lot, you guys.